Namaste and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology Debunking Mythology. Sattology means science of truth, coming from the Sanskrit root word sat, which means truth, or it's a root word for satya, satya pratigya, and it follows the similar etymological reason for mythology. Mythology also comes from Sanskrit root word myth, which means a fake lie imagination. So Sattology is a true antonym of mythology. In today's event and all our programs, we try to be as truthful as possible, and everything comes back to, or whatever is available to us, and everything comes back to where we start in the first place. The Vedic scriptures are not mythology. So today we have very, very special guest. He is an advocate. In US, you call them attorneys, and he works for the human rights of people who have been oppressed in specific Indian northern state of Jammu and Kashmir. And nowadays there is a change over there in which most of you may not be aware. Some of you may be aware. So without delay, let us welcome Shri Ankur Sharma.
Namaskar.
Namaskar. So before we start off, Ankur, can I call you Ankur? Or
absolutely. No. Ankur is fine.
Yeah. Ankur, before we start off, what is the background which motivates you to fight for these causes? Because this is more important to know, because something which more like for me is what I'm doing motivates me to write books and do this kind of stuff. What motivates you?
No, India is a third world country, as they say, and the colonial hangover and the colonial mindsets, everything you see that has its own manifestations. So when you see injustice happening, when you see injustice institutionalized, when you see marginalized people being targeted, when you see the state apparatus not working for the welfare of its citizens, in fact exploiting its citizens, I think that is something which motivates you or goads you to fight or talk to the power and then work for the human rights or fundamental rights, as they say in our constitution. There's a chapter on fundamental rights, so more specifically on the fundamental rights of the citizens of India. So I think that's something which motivates us.
No, the concept of human rights is very skewed in the United Nations. The human rights are sold practically for the highest bidder nowadays. And so there are a lot of human rights aggressions. And like there's one more program coming up on our show. It's called Dead People Tell No Tales. And so the human rights is celebrated after the rights have been violated. And so there is no concept of aggressors and victims. And so oftentimes the victims end up being defenseless, and the aggressors, they call it after they have performed the act, so there is no defense left, so there is no justice also left. What do you have to say on that? Since you are an advocate, you can tell me more.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, that's a situation here as well, but I'll tell you very specific as far as the state of J&K is concerned. I'll talk specific. In the state of J&K, or now which is the Union Territory or the federally administered area, the UT, the Union Territory of J&K, you had what is called as minority rights being given to the majority community. Minority rights in the first instance are exclusively meant for the minority communities based on religion and linguistics. And minority rights are a short protection, a constitutionally guaranteed fundamental rights protection in favor of the minority communities against the tyranny of the majority in a democratic setup. So in Jammu and Kashmir, you have 70%, around 69.23%, around 70% on the basis of 2011 census, Muslims, and rest of the population are non-Muslims. So what we had in J&K is the minority rights meant for non-Muslims through various government schemes, more than 60 to 70 government schemes, and the status that comes with minority rights was being given away to the majority community. So we fought against this in the apex court of the country, the Supreme Court of India. Between 2016 and 18, I myself filed a public interest litigation informing the apex court about this ironical situation and denial of fundamental rights to the marginalized and the minority communities of J&K, which happens to be the non-Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Jain, Buddhists, Christians. And in March 2018, the Honorable Supreme Court of India was pleased to pass an order saying that yes, now the state government and the federal government has also agreed by filing an affidavit that minority rights should go to minorities, and they'll be doing something to correct it. Rights which the state cannot deny to any of the citizens. Satisfies is something which satisfies us. I think the voice was breaking probably.
Yeah, Ankurji, your internet connection was weak. So can you repeat everything what you said? Because we could only see a frozen screen and a very slow voice. Can you check it, please?
Yeah, I have fixed this problem. I just got it fixed.
Okay. Can you repeat this answer, please? Because I think we missed out most of it.
I will. So in the Union Territory of J&K, which was earlier the state of J&K, you had fundamental rights of the minorities, the minority rights enshrined under Article 29 and 30 of the Indian Constitution. They were being given away to the majority community in J&K. On the basis of 2011 census, the percentage of Muslims in J&K is around 70%, and rest are non-Muslims. So the minority on the basis of religion and language, linguistic and religious minorities, as the Constitution of India recognizes, non-Muslims qualify that. One of the litmus tests of secularism, the secular credential of the state, is this: what kind of protection and rights you're giving to the minority community against the so-called tyranny of the majority in a democratic setup. So you have a concept of minority rights, and they are guaranteed as fundamental rights. So what was happening in the last 70 years in the state of J&K was these minority rights meant for non-Muslims, nearly 60 to 70 government schemes of affirmative action being given away to the majority community, against which, in the first place, these rights were legislated. So I went to the Supreme Court of India, the apex court of the country, and filed a public interest litigation on behalf of the minority communities of J&K. And between 2016 and 2018, I fought not only with the federal government, but also with the state government. Initially, the dilly-dallying, etc. But ultimately, it so happened that during the course of hearing, the courts also got very, very serious on this issue. And ultimately, both governments were forced to form a committee. And the committee had to submit a report before the Supreme Court on affidavit, on the basis of which it was assured that now in J&K, the minority communities, the actual minorities, will get these fundamental rights. So I think on 12th March 2018, this judgment was delivered, and we felt so satisfied that we have really won fundamental rights, guaranteed rights for millions of people, for lakhs of people who happen to be the minority communities. So yes, for the last 70 years, these people were defenseless. Their human rights were being violated. I mean, minority rights is also a subset of human rights. Fundamental rights is a subset of human rights. So if you see in the broader spectrum, we had to our, glory or victory, etc., whatever you may term it as, ensuring that minorities get minority rights in J&K. We did it through the courts. But yes, ultimately for 70 years, they suffered.
So the concept of majority and minority in India is very skewed, and it's purely on religious grounds. And generally, the left usually works for the minorities. And in any country of the world, any part of the world, it's the local population is taken into account in any administration. Local population, not the whole country. Even in the US also, there is a concept of minority and majority from the point of view of race. So the minority races, like the African American race or the Caucasian race, European Caucasian race, and the Asian Caucasian, there are three different races there. See, the minority rights are judged on the basis of the local population, not on the basis of the country. So in certain states of the United States, the minorities are those people who are locally locally, in the local sense, like some places the white Caucasians are in majority, and in some places the African Americans are in majority. So the laws are made to protect the minorities of that state. That's the purpose of the left. But in India is exactly opposite. The majority population in any state is has less rights than the minority in India. But in the case of in the case of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, the majority enjoys complete dominance over the minority in terms of all the policies and the resources. So, how this skewed definition in India is used, whether they don't not under do they not understand English, or they just want to go against the flow of the whole world.
Now, I can tell you this. I mean, for the US audience, it is very important to understand that minorities in Indian Constitution, under the Indian Constitution, are religious and linguistic minorities. That's number one. Minorities are identified at two levels: national and state, which means federal and state. Now, the law of the land, as has been evolved by the Honorable Supreme Court of India, the Apex Court of India, is this. Suppose a national minority is a majority in a state. In that state, that particular minority will not have the minority status, nor will it get the minority benefits which are meant for the minorities. Other minorities will get it. So Muslims, as far as India is concerned, are considered and notified as the national minorities. But Muslims in the state of J&K are majority. So the law would apply like this. Kashmiri or a Muslim of Jammu and Kashmir will not have minority rights. The non-Muslims here will have. But despite this, and despite a ruling by the Supreme Court that state will form as the basic unit for minority identification, I think with impunity and with immunity, these schemes were being given away to the unqualified sections of the society, to the illegal beneficiaries, causing a loss of thousands and thousands of crores yearly to the state exchequer. Because you have, for the minorities, scholarship schemes for education, soft loans, so many schemes of the Department of Social Welfare, of the Department of Minority Affairs. So if you put it in total, around 60 to 70 schemes are exclusively meant for the minority communities. And I can tell you something, even after getting a Supreme Court judgment in this regard, and even after seeing changes in the Prime Minister's office implementation guidelines related to minorities, the fate of minorities in J&K remains the same. Even as on date, despite a Supreme Court judgment and several representations, the minority rights are not being given to the non-Muslims in J&K. The Prime Minister's office new 15-point program is a program which includes in itself a list of 15 schemes meant exclusively for the minorities. It's available on Google. It's available on Prime Minister of India's website. In these schemes implementation guidelines, there's a clause 7b, which says that if a national minority is a majority in a state, in that state, that national minority will not have a minority status. These states include, and I'm quoting, these states include state of J&K, Andaman and Nicobar, state of Punjab, etc., etc., etc. 9, 10. State of J&K is specifically covered. And we fought for it also in the Supreme Court. Despite that, the minority rights are not being given to, even as on date, to the minorities. I think it's a big churning which has to happen. The Supreme Court judgments probably, and it is the non-Muslims who are at the receiving end. And I just wanted to give a little background to this. That in 1947, when India was divided on the basis of religion, India became a secular state. Pakistan became Islamic Republic of Pakistan. But you had a very strange thing happening in India. Through Article 370 and 35A, probably the jihadists or the Islamists who were deeply entrenched into the system at that point of time managed to create a non-secular, theocratic Islamic state within the secular territory of India. How do I say this? Article 370 and 35A ensured that since J&K is a Muslim majority state, therefore the Indian constitution will not apply. Article 370 ensured that since J&K is a Muslim majority state, therefore it will have its own constitution, unlike other states, exclusively own constitution and its own flag. So state within state. on the basis of Muslim subnationalism. Since it is a Muslim majority state, therefore it will have a special status managed through Article 370. So what you had was a non-secular theocratic Islamist state apparatus, constitutionally sanctioned and nourished in the secular polity or the secular territory of the country. So therefore, non-Muslims would not get anything. So in last 70 years, it is this nature of the state apparatus of the state of J&K which explains as to why non-Muslims being in minority were being denied and are being denied minority rights in J&K. I had to fight in the Supreme Court. And still after fighting, we see that nothing changes on ground. So therefore, we say that even after abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, the de facto Islamic State still remains in existence. And this is a proof of that. We say that with the abrogation of 370 and 35A, it is only the legal structure of the Islamic State or the de jure Islamic State which was dismantled and demolished. But the de facto state continues to remain. There are so many instances against and manifestations of this Islamic State against which we are fighting. But then I cited you an example of denial of minority rights to non-Muslims in a Muslim majority state. And these rights are constitutionally guaranteed. Fundamental rights, Chapter 3, something which cannot be denied. Supreme Court has said that these rights form the soul of the Constitution. So I think that is the situation probably. And this is just one instance. As far as state-sponsored demographic assault on non-Muslim areas is concerned, that's another topic that I can discuss, because laws were legislated to ensure that Muslims are given ownership of state lands in Hindu majority areas so that demographically they can be changed. And you will find it in Google and everywhere that I got that Roshni Act, the act using which state lands were being given selectively to the Muslims, abolished, declared unconstitutional for the courts. I had to fight against it between 2014 and 2020 for 6 long years.
It is always known that in most of the Islamic nations, they are theoretic states, and they do not allow the same religious rights to the minorities. Classical cases, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and even other Islamic nations where the Hindus or any non-Muslims are not respected for their faith. And the words like kafir are used and other things are used against them.
But here's the distinction between those states and the state of Pakistan and the state of India. State of India was declared to be a secular state. It continues to remain a secular state. But you see the deep entrenchment of the jihadists and pan-Islamists in the system, that they managed to carve out a non-secular, theocratic, theological Islamic state within the secular territory of India, within the secular polity of India. Like just now I explained, infidel constitution will not apply. That was the subtext through Article 370, which has been abolished now. Infidel constitution will not apply. The basis was Muslim subnationalism. So that's ironical. Pakistan is declared an Islamic state. Saudi Arabia is a declared Islamic republic, or the monarchy. I'm sorry. So, but here is a unique situation where the model of Muslim brotherhood was deployed. And what is that? That in constitutional democracies, you use and abuse constitutional freedoms to enter the democratic institutions, control the democratic institutions, and then subvert them from within. So that is how the Indian democratic institutions were subverted. Parliament was subverted. Article 370 was introduced, and in a secular polity, as an exception, a Muslim state was created, an Islamic state was created. So, I mean, that is how we distinguish it from other countries.
Now, you mentioned the word Pakistan, and we all know, most of the Americans know that they are on the wrong side of the history. And most of the Americans, the legislators in America also know very well that it's a state which lives on aid. Now, so what is the interest of these people to move towards a system which has already failed and be connected to them, which has already failed economically, culturally, and you can see what has happened. Like in 1919, Pakistan was one of the richest parts of India, because all the trade used to go from there to through Kabul. In 1947, and also it was very rich. But today, we all know it's a failed state, and it's gradually maybe on the verge of breaking apart. So what is the love affair that these people have with that state which is already failing?
No, if you do not call the problem by its real name, you will never get uh, the solution.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
the problem with the world is that it does not recognize Pakistan as an instrument of establishment of caliphate. Pakistan is not a nation. Pakistan collectively is a state. It's a Muslim state. And it considers itself as an instrument of establishment of caliphate across the entire world. Now, until and unless we recognize this reality, we realize this reality, we internalize this reality, I don't think we'll be able to understand Pakistan in its proper perspective. Pakistan is anti-nation. The concept of nation states, Pakistan is anti-nation. You have matter and antimatter. A small quantity of antimatter destroys the entire matter. Pakistan is that antimatter for the matter. So until and unless we recognize this reality that they consider themselves as the only instrument, the only state apparatus for the establishment of caliphate, destruction of non-believers or heathens, we'll not be able to understand Pakistan, and will be continuously, I mean, through cost benefit analysis, will be using it or being used by it. So I think the entire world should recognize that Pakistan is dangerous to world peace. Entire world should recognize that Pakistan is anti-nation. Pakistan is anti-international order. Until and because it is an instrument of destruction, it is an instrument of it's a terrorist state, and it's a death cult institutionalized as a state. So it has to be dismantled. Until and unless we realize that and work in that direction, I don't think we'll get solutions. There will be more confusion. There will be experts talking on the history of Pakistan, or the civilization of Pakistan, or the culture of Pakistan, or strategic importance of Pakistan. But this is the reality that I've told you. We have internalized it. We are in the front line of this terrorist state, where the process of Islamization of Himalayas we are witnessing with our open eyes. They are so deeply entrenched into even the Indian system through the Pakistani flanks that the subversion is all-time high. It's a, Pakistan is a pure terrorist state, death cult state, and I think being in the front line of that, Jammu and Kashmir is the first front line. This terrorist state of this terrorist state, we through experience or on the basis of experiential understanding and practical things have come to this conclusion, and it has to be destroyed.
No, the you absolutely named it correctly, because the Pakistan as a nation doesn't exist. It's an idea, and it's an idea of a caliphate. We all know, and Turkey is experiencing that, because Erdogan tried to be the new caliphate, and his lira is now half of rupee. So, which is, we have seen that just yesterday, Apple stores stopped selling Apple iPhones in Turkey, and Pakistan has already reached that state 10 years before. But now we are seeing, just because of China, it is being propped up, and most of the Americans know that it is a university of terror, and people know that. The problem comes in when India or other civilized nations expect the same in return from that state, Pakistan. And the Pakistani cronies in India, like Farooq Abdullah and the earlier Chief Minister Mufti Muhammad Saeed, and all these are cronies of that state. Now, when these people, they continue the same propaganda, so is it for their personal benefit because they receive money, or to loot the Indian state? Because these 3 or 4 families, they control the entire state. And then there is a lobby which propagates Kashmiriyat, and which tries to hide all this, what do you call it, putting a calm face on a Dracula. So it's like that. Do you think that those people are actually fooling the Indian state, or Indian state is foolish enough to believe them and keep them in the limelight? If it was
Indian
USA, I
state,
can tell you, if they was in USA, they would be in some jail. I can tell you for sure.
Indian state is foolish enough to entertain them and allow them to capture our democratic institutions. Pakistan, as I said, is an ideological state. And you talked about Farooq Abdullah, Mufti Muhammad Said, and other parties, the Apni Party, the PC, Mehbooba Mufti, etc. All so-called mainstream Kashmiri politicians and political parties, they're all Pakistani flanks. They've always subverted the Indian democracy. They've always abused the freedoms available under the Indian Constitution. They've always entered our democratic institutions, controlled our democratic institutions to subvert them from within. They are working on an ideological premise. They, since Pakistan, in the form of a state as an abstract entity, a political abstract entity, is an Islamic state, these are the actors. These actors are perpetuating, I mean, the work of the Islamic State as far as the state of India is concerned. I mean, the project of Islamization of Himalayas is a project envisaged by ISI and Pakistani Islamists. That if you Islamize Himalaya, then you can Islamize Sanatan. Because in 800 years of their continuous rule, they could not Islamize the entire civilization. So now they believe that until and unless Himalayas are Islamized, peats of Himachal are Islamized, and Char Dham, etc., Dehradun, Uttarakhand, these are Islamized. The Indian civilization cannot be Islamized. So in that project they're working. I can tell you that you had a recent example in 2018. The chief minister of the state came out with an executive direction granting legal immunity in favor of Muslims to commit two crimes. They can occupy lands and they can slaughter cow. It was a 5-page order, a classified document which I brought out in the public domain. It's called as 14th February order passed by Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti, in which she writes at page number 1 that if a Muslim occupies, encroaches upon any type of land in Jammu province, especially in Hindu dominated areas, no district magistrate or head of the police, SSP, will take any action against such Muslim. If suppose there is a court order for eviction, no police officer will provide police assistance for carrying out evictions of Muslims. That is the kind of orders that these people pass. What bigger proof than this you need that the state is A, working as a non-secular entity, a Muslim state, and B, that these people are Pakistani flanks who are using Indian systems, subverting Indian systems to destroy Indian systems, ultimately to destroy Indian civilization. What more proof? Denial of minority rights to the actual minorities, non-Muslims, granting legal immunity to Muslims to occupy lands in Hindu-dominated areas to change the demography and what is called as state-sponsored demographic change, settling in an organized manner using state apparatus illegal Rohingyas and Bangladeshi immigrants in Hindu-dominated areas of Jammu province, around military establishments, allowing members of a particular religion, the Muslims, to occupy state lands, forest lands, and riverbeds in Jammu province, the Hindu dominated areas, about which affidavits have been filed by the state authorities in J&K High Court in 2 public interest litigations. The entire data I have, 90% of the encroachments on these areas, forests and riverbeds, have been done with state connivance, by the state allowing members of a particular religion, Muslims, to do that. So I think Indian state, despite being told of all these things, considers themselves, these people, as mainstream political actors because they participate in democratic processes. But they don't know or do not realize or do not want to realize that these are the subverters and working on the model of Muslim Brotherhood, that you purge modern democracies by entering democratic institutions.
That's a very classical ploy of Muslim Brotherhood. That's what they're trying to do in the US also. The state is known by the actions, like the karma is a very popular word in the US. The karma of the state is also equally important. So if you keep complaining and do not act, and if the citizens have to act despite having the elected government, how does the democracy will go forward when the human rights of a particular section are avoided? Now, in this classical case, you have highlighted so many things which are actually happening on the ground, and probably the government is aware of that also. So what are the actions which government has not taken, which should be taken ideally?
No, of course. I mean, the first thing I'll answer you about the role of citizens in a democracy. Now, in modern democracies, you have different organs of the government. You have executive, you have legislature, and you have judiciary. So something which the executive is not, able to do, or the legislature has been subverted, a normal citizen, a normal individual can go to the judiciary and seek refuge, like we did. There were genocidal laws which were legislated by the non-secular Islamic State of J&K against the non-Muslims of J&K, which we challenged in the courts, and ultimately these laws were declared unconstitutional. Similarly, the role of media is very important. It is only through the media that I brought out this 14th February 2018 order in public domain, and everybody could know about it. And the pressure was so huge that ultimately that order became redundant. The issues of Rohingyas and Bangladeshis, which it is the responsibility of the federal government under the Foreigners Act to take care. We fought against it. We organized awareness camps about these things. And ultimately, action started. Now it is halted. It is not happening because the major problem that it continues to remain a de facto Islamic State is a reality. So that's another thing. But then these things were done. So I think in a democracy, you cannot depend upon your legislators, nor on the executive, be it a prime minister or a chief minister. I think your constitution, your democracy provides you with sufficient tools and different organs of the government, and by virtue of which you can fight. So I think we have decided that we'll fight. We are not here to convince the governments. We'll raise issue, and if the government doesn't deliver, either we have decided to join politics, and we are a political party. Ekjut Jammu or United Jammu is now a political party, or because we're fighting all these things, and we see that the present day government is not doing anything seriously addressing of these issues. So either you become a political party, be a part of the legislature or executive, fight through courts, through media, through public awareness campaigns, or you suffer. It's your choice. We decided to fight. We fought. We have so many victories to our credit.
Now, in the case of, for example, in the case of Pakistan, the globally people know that it's on the wrong side of the history. Everybody knows that's why there are sanctions are put on them. Financially, they are made weaker day by day. And what stops the Indian government to claim the parts of Hindu Kush as part of the Indian history, which is Mahabharata, documented in Mahabharata very well? It is Takshila was the place where Mahabharata was spoken. The entire Sindh is the area where Maharishi Pulaste Rishi used to live there, Maharishi Pulaste. And most of the northwestern Pakistan, parts of Afghanistan, even today have a lot of symbols of Hindu culture in the past, a lot of symbols. Not everything has been eliminated yet. So what stops India for claiming all those areas?
It's the basic nature of the state of India. The state of India is hostile to the nation of India. The state of India is anti-civilization. I mean, that's the crux which everybody now believes in India. That's the crux of the Indian state. Indian state has been taken over from within. And it is working against the nation of India. So why should it talk about Hindu Kush or Sindhu or symbols of Hindu resurgence, a cow, for that matter, uniform civil code? So the basic problem is that the state of India, the state apparatus, has been taken over from within, and it is working against the civilizational interest. It is in fact hostile to the civilizational interests. And that is what we see in J&K as well. And that is what you see globally as well. The soft power of this civilization is never a tool for them. The civilizational symbols or reclaiming civilizational whatever things, cities or whatever areas you talk about, will never be a priority. State of India is not kind to the nation of India.
You know, many analysts, they keep on talking about Pakistani politics and giving respect to the leaders. And you have already mentioned that how they are all thugs. They are just trying to occupy land, and they'll keep fighting because the looters have never been peaceful in the entire history, any part of the world. Ali Baba and Chalis Chor, that was a old story. That is a fictional story. But the looters have never been satisfied. Now, the point comes in now, when you do not take action against a known enemy, and most of the militaries and other doctrines are built on a secular ideology, that at one point, it's always the ideology that wins. Second thing is, and I'm combining two questions because of lack of time. The India is known for yoga, meditation, and the Hindu culture, including Mark Twain, the very famous American poet, He talks about Varanasi, and he talks about Bhagavad Gita. And this is the American mainstream, the American hero. They are talking about the culture symbols of India, where Kashmir is the most prominent symbol there. It's like a crown. A lot of rishis and a lot of munis have lived there, and Kashmir philosophers have been known all over the world, including Adi Sankaracharya. So that is what Americans are attracted, or the West is attracted to India for. If the Indian state doesn't take care of those symbols which attract people to India, which creates India's soft power, then what is going to be the future of India? Just a hypothetical question for you. Hello, Ankurji,
Yes,
did you?
I did. So
Okay,
I'll answer this.
yes.
Yes. It's fine. Yes, I'll answer this. So the answer to your first question is very simple. Until and unless you recognize jihad as a war form, jihad as a doctrine of Islamic expansion, a total war of a totalitarian regime, you will not be able to respond. And that is something which the entire world is suffering now. Denial of recognizing jihad as a war form is forcing us to come up with so-called quote unquote secular doctrines. You can't fight a total war, a totalitarian war, a jihad war form with secular doctrines. So that's answer to your first question. You will fail, and we are failing. We have seen that we are failing. It is relentless. It is constant. Person who is born, somebody who is going to the grave, is involved at various levels. We can discuss about this probably in a separate interview in more detail. As far as your second question is concerned, I've already answered that. I say that the Indian state, since has been taken over from within, it is working against the nation of India. It is hostile to the civilizational interests. So why should it talk about the civilization? Why should it use yoga or Kashmir or the Rishi order of Kashmir as something of a kind of soft power in the world? It is ashamed of doing this. In the name of secularism, civilizational interests have been undermined in the last 70 years. The nationalist population, people who believe in the civilization of the country, have been humiliated. You see such kind of humiliation in J&K in a very blatant form. So why should it talk about civilization? As far as this topic is also concerned, as to how the state of India is working against the nation of India, is hostile to the civilization, hostile to the nation of India, probably we can have another session in which I can probably discuss in great detail, because there are so many dimensions, ideological and practical, to this proposition of mine that Indian state is hostile to the nation of India, that it requires a separate interview, I believe.
Oh, great point, and I love that you're very articulate, very clear in your thoughts, and because you work on the ground, so you have a lot of visibility out there. Now, if you look at there are more than 3,000 temples, old temples, ancient temples in the Kashmir Valley. I'm not even talking about Jammu. Kashmir Valley, which have been left, and we have many videos on that, many videos of Rajesh Kumar Singh on this channel, where we have documented that Durga temples stretch from Kashmir till Hotan in China today, and Xinjiang province. And but there is no, we have not seen any tourism, and you have already told the reasons also why it is happened, why it has happened like that. Do you think it will make sense for you and for all of us, is that to separate Jammu from Kashmir altogether and have a separate political entity for the state of Jammu? Because I think that's the only thing which will stop further damaging of Jammu region, at least.
Yes, you talked about Kashmir Valley. That's the capital of Hindu genocide. Everybody remembers 1990s. So Hindu genocide is unabated. But the most unfortunate thing, 1990s was the period when Kashmir was 100% Islamized. Entire Hindu population was sent away. People were killed, raped, mass murders, and they were sent packing back. 5 lakh people had to state of India. But the most unfortunate thing is it is the state of India itself which is in denial about the happening of Hindu genocide. So what do you talk about temples? Why should the state of India protect it? The destruction of temples in the valley is also one of the symbols or manifestations of Hindu genocide of Hindus. Not only the individuals, but their memories have also to be wiped off. The symbols have to be wiped off. Their temples have to be destroyed. That is something which happened. So if you in denial of genocide of Hindus, as far as your second, no other way of checking Islamist expansion, the spillover of jihadi warfare towards the nation of India, except than separating Jammu from Kashmir, which means that Jammu has to be separated from Kashmir administratively, politically. It has to be made a full-fledged state, an independent state. Jammu province, comprising of 10 districts, should be made an independent state so that the cancer of jihad can be contained. It is centered in Kashmir Valley. And Kashmir has to be divided into 2 union territories. One union territory for the victims of genocide, for those Hindus who suffered genocide at the hands of Islamists and terrorists. It is the responsibility of a secular state to give them a secured land domain, a mass where they can live and survive peacefully with security. It is impossible until and unless you carve out a part of Kashmir, declare it as a UT, and rehabilitate and resettle victims of genocide there, who happen to be non-Muslims, especially Hindus, and then rest of the Kashmir, another UT, so that the so-called mainstream political actors of Kashmir Valley do not subvert Indian democracy. That is how you contain and arrest jihad. That is how you contain and arrest the project of Islamization of Himalayas and Islamization of Sanatan. And that is how you contain and arrest the bigger battle unleashed against this civilization, the battle of Khorasan, within which the raid of India or Ghazwa Hind has to happen through these modes, through Islamization. So to reverse Islamization, division of J&K, reorganization of J&K is very important. Make Jammu, comprising of 10 districts, a separate state, divide Kashmir into 2 UTs, rehabilitate victims of genocide in 1 UT, and other Kashmiris in another other part of the UT.
So the natives or the indigenous population of the entire subcontinent, South Asia, are Hindus, and they have been converted in large numbers through Islamic attacks and Christian attacks. Now, this is if you talk about the indigenous movements and native movements and other movements of the world. And in the particular case, and there are a lot of native protection rights all over the United Nations and other places. Now, this is a classical case of Holocaust against the native population of Kashmir on the basis of invading faiths, which is the Gold, Glory, and God. My last book, if anyone reads it, will come to very clearly, they will understand what's the politics. And ultimately, the politics is to acquire the land and sell it off. Very few people are aware that Jahangir, the Mughal, I call it the ruler or looter of India, he siphoned most of the wealth from Bengal, through Bengal, to just get few European clothes. That's what his goal was. Few European clothes and a name. That's what he wanted for. So in the case of Kashmir, the native populations have been kicked out, and we all know that religion is used to motivate the looters, and that's what has happened in the entire Islamic history, right from invasion of Persia to Kashmir. But the native rights have not been protected. Do you think that is a good platform for the global community to look at Kashmir in a new way?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I've discussed Kashmir in a way which you will never find being discussed. It is always marketed or sold as something else. But we have to realize that this is the global capital of genocide of Hindus. And yes, the native population is not secure. And the most unfortunate thing that it is the state of India which is in denial mode. I mean, the victims have been demanding declaration of whatever happened to the Hindus in 1990s in parts of Kashmir and parts of Jammu province as genocide, the state of India, despite being a signatory to the Convention on Genocide, the UN Convention, has chosen not to do that. Because, as I said, that it has been taken over from within. It cannot annoy Islamists. There's so many instances to this. But yes, the world population should see Jammu and Kashmir as a new entity. Probably more concepts will evolve, the understanding will be broadened, and the kind of subversion that you see will give everybody an international experience of how these jihadists and Islamists operate in constitutional democracies through subversion.
Is there a fear that Article 370 may be reinstated back in the Kashmir area?
Article 370 and 35A, through various interventions of the federal government, has been partially brought back in. So the fear of Article 370 coming back is not unfounded in the sense that you have Article 35A, which prevented the Indian citizens from acquiring the citizenship of the state of J&K. And immediately after the abrogation, you have the new domicile laws, which are exactly similar to Article 35A, which ultimately discourages Indian citizens for 15 long years to get any kind of rights in the state of J&K. Rights related to opportunity of applying for a public employment or getting an admission in a government-run professional college for education purposes or scholarship, and in some time for land matters also, purchasing land, etc. It was banned. It is practically banned now as well. So 370 will come exactly in a similar way back as it existed before October 2019, is ruled out, but through backdoor, portions of it have already entered. And as I said, the 370-35A ultimately demolished the de jure Islamic State, the legal entity as an Islamic state. The de facto Islamic State is still in existence. 370 and 35A, instead of being taken to its logical conclusion, which ultimately meant destruction of the de facto Islamic State also, was partially reintroduced through backdoor and through various legislations. So I think the situation is grim. It will not come that way. It is coming through the backdoor, and until and unless its abrogation is taken to its logical conclusion, its abrogation will lose its meaning. But we are fighting against those interventions also on so many fronts. It's a fight which we have, and therefore we are a political party now, and probably we seek support of the public on these issues, and the public does support us for speaking truth and fighting against these evils.
Thank you so much, Ankur Sharma ji. I really like the clarity of thought you have, and also the ground understanding you have. And being an advocate, you are also very articulate on these matters. And for viewers who watch this, do watch it on YouTube and share, and let us know your feedback. And this was primarily meant for the Western audience, but Indians will also learn what is actually happening in India, in their state of Jammu and Kashmir. So thank you so much, Ankurji, and namaste, and see you next time.
Thank you so much.